Hey, and welcome to Crossroads Consulting, where we help companies outsource, grow, and protect their assets. I'm Billy Rhodes. This is Jeff Rhodes. And today we have a special guest, Kevin McCrann. Welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing well.
Yeah.
I'm doing well, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Great. Yeah, I know you and Jeff have worked together for a while. This is my first time meeting you, so welcome again. And if you would just share your company and what you do and your background,
How you got started, Kevin, and all of that stuff, and how you're a rock star in the background screenings, domestic and international.
There you go. Well, my name is Kevin McCrann. I am the managing partner of Accurate Information Systems. We've gotten our start back in July of 2000 up in Long Island, New York, where I was a partner with a security company. We had about 85 employees, and a lot of our vendors or clients up there were looking for a way to do background checks on their people. So I started Accurate Information Systems Incorporated with basically $3,000 in my pocket, and grew it from there. In July of 2012, we moved down to Venice, Florida, where we are now, County Sarasota, and we changed our corporate structure to an LLC. We started from basically nothing until what a multi-million-dollar a year company we are now.
Yeah, and you have an office in Australia and New Zealand.
Exactly, Jeff. We started in Florida in 2012, and in 2014 we opened an office in Queensland, Australia, in a town called Surfers Paradise, and that's under AIS Group International, the company name. We now have offices not only in Surfers Paradise, but in Brisbane and Melbourne, Australia, and we also have a company now in Auckland, New Zealand.
Yeah, you've got an interesting arrangement with the Australian government. Are you at liberty to describe that, or at least give us a heads up on what you're doing there, and then also expand on the international side?
I can. We are accredited by the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission. It is a national criminal intelligence commission within Australia. We also are accredited by the Australian Federal Police and the New Zealand Ministry of Justice, which is the New Zealand's police in New Zealand. We went through a lot to become accredited with them, and we're pretty proud of that. In the U.S., we also have gotten a few different accreditations. We have the accreditation through our industry watchdog, if you will, the PBSA, which is the Professional Background Screenings Association. We have the accreditation for the U.S., and we are proud to say we are only one of 13 companies at the present time that has a dual accreditation, one with the general accreditation, which is a global accreditation, which covers other companies like ours that are based out of the United Kingdom, Australia, and Middle East area. But we are one of only 13 companies at this time, so we're pretty proud of having dual clearance.
Yeah, and you're doing work in I think 165 countries. Is that
Yeah, roughly. We do it that, and we have the ability to do it there in that many countries. Mainly our work is in the European Union, the United Kingdom post-Brexit, Australia, New Zealand, China, Singapore, Philippines, and Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates at this time.
So I'm intrigued, right? Because I know how we search for things here in the States, but it's all the same global technology, right? I mean, is it the same process, or do you have to use completely different methods?
No, it's what I tell clients of mine that join us, and I say to them, if they're in the United States anyway, I say, take everything you know about background checks and forget about it, because it is completely different elsewhere and around the world. It's, first of all, it's not very culturally accepted as of yet in many areas. There's different laws and regulations like the GDPR in Europe, which significantly limits the amount of information you can get and hold on to, for that matter. There's different regulations in Australia. There's different ways of doing things. One of the biggest ways of Australia and the United Kingdom, as an example, that's a national search, along with Canada as well, I'll add. Where in the United States, it's localized. We don't have a national search in the United States that's publicly accessible.
And talk about the different types of background checks that you do on an international basis. There's screenings, there's background checks. Talk about, since it's so different internationally than what we're used to here in the U.S., if you can describe some of the challenges and the types of background checks that you encounter on an international basis.
Internationally, Jeff, it really depends on which country. I'll generalize. In Europe, for example, we can get criminal records. We can get insolvency checks in certain cases. In other cases, we cannot. Certain countries like Spain and Austria, they can only do criminal, or only will do criminal records on citizens. They won't do them on expats. UK, we can just about everything we could do here in the United States. Australia, we could do the same we do here in the States, and that being criminal record, driving records, credit reports, or similar. You really can't call it credit reports, but they're credit reports that we know of, insolvency, if you will. Things like that. Other countries, it's a little more difficult because it's not allowed. Even with consent of the applicant, it's not allowed because the consent is not looked at as a legal authority to get information, especially in the European Union. It's just a consent. And one of the big things in the European Union as compared to the United States is a consent is looked at as a period of time. It's not a general consent for whenever you can use it, wherever you want to use it. The consent is only good for what you requested it for, and you can't use it anytime thereafter for anything else other than over and above without a new consent.
Interesting. With all of the political focus on border crossings, background checks, what changes have you seen over the years, again, focused on the international side?
Not many, Jeff, for us anyway, because we do verifications for employers. We don't do them for individuals or a couple's thing. We don't do that. What I can tell you as far as the United States, because of immigration and stuff, and this went back to George Bush's days, post 9/11 with the Patriot Act, was the development of E-Verify, which is the verification of right to work documents in the United States. That's the biggest thing, but that was mainly due to 9/11. But that's really the only reason to do them for now to coming into the United States.
Yeah, I would imagine that certain countries, certain areas of the globe, maybe even South America, where it's difficult to get information on people because they're just, it's not collated, it's not tracked.
That's correct. That's correct. There's only so much information you can get. Information is only as good as the information that's there. All right. So in other words, what we get is only as good as what they store. So in some countries, a criminal record system is nothing more than a wire basket on somebody's desk. That's really what it is. So we typically do not tell people or clients to run a criminal history search in that particular area. It's just not worth it. Haiti, Dominican Republic, they're just very backwards or very limited in their record keeping abilities. Even in South America, like Venezuela now, we can't do a criminal record in Venezuela since the overthrow of the government. Same thing in Afghanistan. Once the Taliban took over, we stopped doing.
They're all criminals. So what difference does it make, right?
Yeah, you can look at it that way. I mean, even Israel now, we don't do them in Israel right now because of what's going on, because of the security reasons of the Israeli government. They're not readily available or wanting to give out information on people of in their country. It raises a flag in their mind, like why do you want this information and who wants it? Same thing like Libya and Syria and North Korea. There's just certain areas you just don't do criminal records in. Where even now, even the countries that are evolved, their privacy policies are really restricting the ability to get criminal records. And one of those countries is South Korea. South Korea probably has one of the strongest personal identifying data properties or personal information policies in the world. And the way I read it, I could say the GDPR, which is the European Union privacy, is probably written off of the South Korean. It's called PIPA, P-I-P-A. And they significantly restrict the way to get information. And years ago, you'd get a person's South Korean identifying number, and you'd run it through the Seoul Police Department, and they'd give you the record. Now, people don't have to give that ID number to anybody. They don't even have to give it to the police. And Seoul doesn't even want it anymore. So they won't even do a criminal record anymore. So what other companies out there are doing is essentially a database check or a media check. And that's one of the things I suggest to clients. I'm like, look, if you're getting criminal records out of South Korea, ask them if it's a media check. And if it is, are they going to confirm the story that they found is your applicant? And there's a lot of similar names in South Korea. How are you going to tell a Chan from a Chan, or a Win from a Win? Or even in the U.S., John Smith.
Right.
You find a story with John Smith's name in it. Well, how do you say that's your John Smith that you're looking at? That's your subject. Companies can't do that. They'll say, no, we're just going to submit the stories to you, and it's basically your job to figure it out.
Yeah.
So they're providing more questions than they are answers.
So I've been in the HR business a long time, and we know that background checks are very important, especially here in the States, but for every company to be able to do that. But what are some specific markets or industries that bode well for you guys?
As far as what we do,
types of companies, types of industries.
We do a lot of work for the Department of Defense, not the Department of Defense, but the Department of Defense contractors.
Yeah.
Where we are their preferred provider. We do some work for the pharmaceutical industry, and banking and finance are the main companies we do.
Oh yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And in Australia, we actually have the Australian health system. So anybody going into the country of Australia that wants to work in the health field, they have to come through us for their background check to get clearance.
Now, is hospitality a good market for you?
No, it's not, Bill. And there's reasons for that. It's their employees are typically, they just don't want to go through the background check process.
So you're dealing with a little bit higher level type employee, maybe carrying a higher title.
We do, but we do all different levels. What we find, people that are in a higher level position typically don't travel around as much. They're not bouncing from job to job as often as a lower non-skilled person would be.
Right.
We also find that lower non-skilled people typically have a higher criminal conviction rate than the skilled labor. Also, our international records have a lower rate of a record found than they have here in the States. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The United States has an open record law, whereas I can walk in any courtroom in the country and demand to see the records on anybody I want. You can't do that internationally. It doesn't work that way. You need a reason. You need a legal authority to do it. You need consent to do it. A legal authority might be described as a business relationship or a business need. That's the legal authority, but then you need to get consent from the applicant as well. So, and there's a couple of states in the United States that are moving that way, like California, where California requires a new consent every time you do a background check on somebody. Where other states, you can have that consent for the length the person's employed for promotion, investigations, or in-house investigations. So you can use that same consent upon hiring. California, you can't. You need a new consent. And California also uses something called investigative consumer report as opposed to consumer report, which is significantly different.
So with that consent in the U.S., could you run background checks quarterly on employees?
You could. It depends on the wording of the consent, and it depends on the state the person is located in. And then it also depends on the type of background check you're doing.
Yeah.
Currently, there's, I think, 13 states right now that prohibit credit reports for employment purposes, unless the person's working in a fiduciary role, which would be, as you know, accounting. Basically, if they have access to people's credit information, they can use a credit report on that. Then there's other city laws that will go over and above other state laws, like New York and New York City. There's two separate laws. New York City, you essentially need to run two background checks. And the first one is just confirming education and past employment. You make a person a job offer, then you can run the criminal report after that. LA is like that. And then there's ban the box laws. So there's a lot of different regulations that the states are implementing and the cities are, and I think it's a great thing. I wish the EU GDPR would come to the United States. I think data is way too freely given away here in the States. But that's just my personal opinion. It might not be the same as the background association.
Yeah, I was going to say, you had mentioned that in other countries, it's getting more difficult to do the background checks because they're limiting the data that you can get. I would imagine it's the flip side here in the States now with everything going on, that they're opening up these data channels so that people can get more.
Bill, they've always been opened up. There's a lot of companies out there that I feel, this is not an accusation, it's my opinion, that go too far with the data. They store data and they just sell it freely. Database things that are not compliant with Fair Credit Reporting Act. They're just being sold out there, and they're just following a 613 Section A1, I believe it is, where they just send a contemporaneous letter to the employer and the employee that says, hey, we found something here. It may or may not be you. You might want to look into it.
Wow.
Well, right away, you got a angry employee because he's like, wait a minute, this isn't me. And already you're making accusations against me. That data that they're selling is simply a database product. And, you'll see it online for $49.95. They'll give you this, billions of records they search. It's garbage.
So if I'm an employer,
but it's not a good search.
if I'm a business owner, how do I make sure the background check company that I'm working with or going to work with or contemplating working is fully legitimate and the data is, proper?
Well, there's a few questions you want to ask. One, are they accredited by the PBSA? The PBSA is an industry organization that basically is our guide. A lot of our companies in our industry use our organization. We make sure that companies that are accredited follow laws. You want to ask if that database search that we call it criminal comprehensive, other companies might call it a national criminal history. They might call it any other proprietary name, but it's all essentially the same databases that everybody's accessing. Are they verifying any records on there or potential records found on that database? Are they still standing convictions within the court where that was found? If they don't, they're just giving you raw data, which they're not allowed to do, or they shouldn't do anyway. They're putting you in legal jeopardy. There might be false records found. There might be people's names that were removed from the database, but the database never updated it. The criminal comprehensive search it's good to augment the search. It doesn't replace a real good check, which is you run the criminal history search where the person lived and or worked for a past amount of years that your company feels is worth it. Like we feel 7 years back of address history, we'll run the criminal history in those counties and or the state, whichever is available. And a lot of people don't realize this internationally, and we have a problem with this, is that in the US, crimes are prosecuted where the crime occurred, not where the person lived. So as you know, we can drive up to Manatee County or down to Port Charlotte, commit a crime, come back to Sarasota, and if you only run Sarasota County, you're not going to find it. Right? The record's not going to show. But we have now, Florida has a statewide system, so we'll run the state. But a lot of states don't have that system. And unless you run the specific county, you're not going to find the record. So we use that criminal comprehensive search to augment our real search. And then if any potential records are found on that search, we will check that county to make sure that that record is still a true and standing conviction.
Yeah,
and
there's a lot of stuff on social media, buy this, sign up for this, and there's stuff on background checks as well. You can get a background check in 15 seconds. Those are red flags.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Those are the criminal comprehensive searches that we use, or the national criminal history search that other companies call. I don't like calling a national criminal history search because it is not. It's a big piece of Swiss cheese, if you will. There's a lot of holes in it, a lot of data on there doesn't belong on there any longer. So while somebody might want to use that for friends to check on friends or whatever, it should not be used for the permissible purpose of employment.
Yeah, so you mentioned certifications is one way of verifying that the company that you're seeking a background check from is legitimate. Is there any other ways in which you would recommend verifying the company's data is accurate?
Well, you might want to go online and just check to see if there's any class action lawsuits against that particular company. Because that company has a class action lawsuit against them doesn't necessarily mean that they did things incorrectly. While there's smoke, you can understand what might be going on there. I do know a couple of companies that did have lawsuits against them, but they had to be brought into it because that's what lawyers do. But other ways is just make sure that they are registered with the state they are in. You can check the Department of State, anybody's Secretary of State system, to ensure that the company is licensed and regulated or registered in that state.
Yeah, we've heard stories about the bad hire, and the background checks may not be infallible, but in your opinion, how important are they to an employer?
A background check?
Yeah.
Oh, I think they're invaluable. But I think a lot of companies look at it as just a cost. It's not a revenue producing thing. It's not, something that is going to be good for the company. It's like insurance. It's not needed until it's needed insurance. Background checks, you could try to save yourself $5 or $10, but if something happens down the line, and this person that you employed does something to another employee of yours, you're open for legal issues. You're going to be sued. And it could be something the courts say, look, yeah, you should have known this. You didn't know it, but you should have. So therefore, you are now liable.
Yeah, I can see the court saying, look, for $15, you could have done a criminal background check, but you chose not to. And therefore, you hired somebody who had a criminal background and has done something to injure an employee. So you're trying to save money for $15 or even $50, but now you've got a $50,000, $100,000, or maybe even $1 million lawsuit.
Correct.
Simply because you're trying to save. I think it's more important today than ever. Part of it is we're a litigious society, but number two, it's probably more important today to do the background checks. How do you see? Well, you've probably had cases that you've witnessed that resulted in a bad hire and a criminal complaint. Is that accurate?
Actually, we've saved a few companies because of the background check. Up in New York, they're a company that installs Xfinity boxes, things like that in people's houses in the New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania area. They picked up a guy that we did a background check on, and he raped somebody. And because of that, they're in trouble. We've had guys that we've been called from, like the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office called us and wanted to know our records on this one particular person. What happened was this woman was a sexual predator, and in her sentencing, she was not supposed to work with children or even apply to work with children. She applied to work for a Department of Defense contractor as a child care agent in LA. So we sent the records over to show that, yes, she did apply for this job. We found the record that she was a sex offender, and the county went into her and she had violation of probation. We've had another guy who went to the Air Force College, actually, who said he did anyway, and he falsified a education degree copy. He said he went to the Air Force College and he never did. But now he's forged government documents. So he was arrested. So these are all things that were caught before they showed up, poorly for the company.
So you kind of bring up a really good point. Are you able to verify the data behind somebody's background or maybe even a resume and say, look, this resume is bogus here?
Correct. Yes, we can. We do that internationally, in fact, as well, Jeff. We have a lot of people that have bogus degrees, and we get it in writing from the school. Typically, we're not going to put anything on a report that's he said, she said. We want to put something that we have in writing from a school, and I could send you a most recent one yesterday, in fact, where a person from Pakistan stated that they had a master's degree, and in fact, they did not. And they gave it to us in writing, and they stamped it. The school registrar stamped it. This is a fake degree. We get that quite often over in that area, that in India. And because of the graft over there, it's hard to do.
Yeah.
Because of those two countries, the way they operate. But we've gotten a lot of fake degrees.
So how hard is it sometimes with these countries where the people have 4 or 5 names, linked together, right? Based on the mother, the father, the grandmother.
That's difficult even here in the States, Bill. And that's more so with Spanish-speaking countries.
Right.
Yeah.
People here they use their mother's maiden name and their father's name interchangeably or together. So when you run a criminal record search here, like let's say New York State, for example, New York State runs it exactly as you give it to them. John Rodriguez, and here's the date of birth. If the person used John Gonzalez date of birth, it's the same person, it would come back as a clear. Or if you ran it John Rodriguez Gonzalez, it'd come back as a clear. Had you ran it John Gonzalez, you would have found the record. So it is a bit different. When we do criminal record checks internationally, we typically will run the name. Well, we don't do it. We have to give it to the authorities, but we give them the passport name. And that's the name they're known as in that country, because a lot of people, when they come to the States here, they Americanize their name to make it easier.
Right.
For a lot of people. Some of the names for Americans are very difficult to pronounce. And I've seen it, Sri Lanka people have 35 characters in their name. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Yeah. They just go like Bob.
Yeah, it's Bob. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what they are now. And you know what? I don't blame them. It's easier. But when you go to that country, we ran Bob, it wouldn't show. And we give it his name and we give it in the passport name, then we can find a potential record. Yeah. And the records there are limited as far as what they will report to us, because it's only publicly releasable information. We only get information that is acceptable to the public. We do not go behind the scenes. We don't pay anybody under the table. We don't pay government authorities to say, look, what can you really get? That is, while some people do that, we don't do it that way.
Yeah, that's more like private investigator stuff.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I'm not going to do something that's going to put one of my clients in legal jeopardy.
Hey, I got a question. What about the legal marijuana cards and the concealed weapon permits? Does that come up on background checks? Is it allowed or?
Yes, it is. In the United States, it still is. We have a lot of companies that don't want us to test for marijuana. But here's the issue with that. Marijuana is still illegal on the federal level.
Exactly.
So if you're getting tested under DOT or FAA regulations and you test positive for marijuana, you're positive for marijuana, even if you have a card in that particular state.
And that shows up in your search.
Oh yeah, in a drug test. Yes,
we see that a lot. Because exactly what you said, it's still illegal on a federal level. So workers' comp follows that.
Correct.
And we see a lot of claims that don't get reported because the guy will openly admit, "Hey, I got my card. I'm gonna fail this test."
Yeah. Doesn't matter. They're going to fail it. I mean, even in states that have recreational laws and you have a card, you're still going to test positive.
Exactly. And it's still,
say, look, he's still positive.
Yeah.
Great. He's got the card. That's fantastic. We also find a lot of people now are testing positive for amphetamines, which are Adderall, Ritalin, ADHD drugs.
Yeah.
They have a legal prescription for them and they need them. But you know what? You're still testing positive for an amphetamine, which we knew years ago growing up as speed.
Yeah, which is probably worse than marijuana anyways. But.
Yeah. Well, people with ADHD, it affects a little differently, but it's probably worse. You're moving real quick instead of relaxing.
Yeah.
Is it possible for somebody to create a fake identification and kind of skew the system?
It is. We find that a lot in Europe. oddly enough. There are quite a few websites in Europe where I can get a digital passport within seconds. You cannot, you can't get the actual card, but the Interpol is shutting these systems down as we speak. They are actively going after them. I had at one time a Singapore passport and a Belgian passport. Had my picture on it, looked like me, had my name on it. Had you run the numbers, it would come back as a legitimate passport because it was a legitimate passport, just my name and my personal information was imposed over that. And because it's digital, it's easy to do. So there's a lot of companies, there's a lot of websites out there that were doing that. But like I said, Interpol is shutting them down. We have a system now, it's a document verification system that also scans passports to see if it's been altered. Where
Wow.
we can put a PDF file into our system and it can show if it had been altered at any time. And
so you mean the fake ID of me standing in front of the picture board from Indiana,
Yeah.
doesn't,
no more fake IDs being 21 anymore, Bill. When we were kids, it was 18, but yeah.
So hey, what about the whole TSA pre-service?
Known traveler number.
I just did that. Does that show up on the background checks?
No, that's federal government does that. We don't do that. I have the TSA as well. Mine took 6 weeks to get done for some reason.
Yeah.
But it did. No, it doesn't show up in the background check. Truckers have that too. They have a Twix card, which is similar to a TSA, but it's for DOT.
Right.
Yeah. Twix card, I think they go through TSA. You can use that in addition to the TSA card, I believe.
Gotcha.
No travel number anyway.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're also an expert witness in situations. Is that not accurate? I think you told me that a while ago.
Yeah, I've testified on behalf of a background check company and other legal issues before in front of grand juries.
And so why would you be called into a court situation? Is it just simply to verify and add credibility to the
It depends. If I'm on the prosecuting side, I'm really happy. If I'm on the defendant side, I really don't like doing that, especially because I'm being pulled into it. I just would testify as far as to how things should be done, how you should follow the Fair Credit Reporting Act, follow 613 protocols, which is the adverse and the pre-adverse action letters. How you should make sure that the information you're reporting to an employer on somebody is them. You find 3 points of ID, a name match, a date of birth match, and an address match, or if you can, in certain situations, a social security match, which a lot of places in the States are pulling the social security numbers off the record, which is great.
Right.
Years ago, Massachusetts, your driver's license was your social security number. Many years ago, this is.
Yeah.
My age now. Yeah, and then they randomize social security numbers, because if you tell me the first 3 digits, like our age here, if you tell me the first 3 digits of your social security number, I could probably tell you what state you were born in.
Yeah, so Massachusetts, you probably start with a 0, right?
0. New York is 06 and then something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can tell, like Puerto Rico's are 7s or 5s. You can tell. So what the Social Security Administration did was they randomized it.
And if it starts with a 9, it's no bueno, right?
No bueno. No bueno.
Well,
Yeah.
Kevin, listen, we certainly appreciate your time. We could probably talk for a few hours on this. Sure. Any final thoughts that you'd like to add that maybe we didn't cover, and something that you guys do?
Just that we do background checks globally. Our company, we do thousands and thousands of them a month. We know what we're doing. I would recommend any company you use, make sure that they know the laws in that particular country, that they're not applying U.S. law to international law. It's completely different. And any records they obtain, make sure that they're legally reportable against somebody.
Now, do you have subscription-based programs or a la carte? Is it just always per background check is what you're charging? Or
we have contracts that we require. Specifically, if they're going to be out of the European Union, we need standard contractual clauses, along with other language in those contracts, so we can legally transfer their data across, international lines. We have that in Australia as well. We have some laws, consents in Saudi Arabia, as they have a new privacy laws coming out now. So yeah, excuse me. So yeah, there are different things that are needed.
Excellent, excellent. So the moral of the story here is spend a little bit of money, get the background checks, get it done from a certified, authentic organization such as Accurate Information Systems, because the cost of a bad hire is just monumental compared to the cost in protecting your business from a bad hire.
Yeah, the PR should be really, really bad, and in some cases insurmountable.
Yeah, yeah. So Kevin, yeah, again, thanks for your time. This is what Crossroads Consulting is all about. We work with companies from the very beginning, their birth, all the way to the exit strategy and all the points in between. We bring professionals, we bring experts to the table that provide information that you would probably have to pay for to get, but you're getting information here that's free. You're getting clarity on certain things such as background checks. You know what to do now with regards to background checks. You know how to make sure that the background check company is legitimate. You know how to get in touch with Kevin and Accurate Information Systems. You can go through us. You can go to Kevin's website. But it's absolutely worth your while. And this is what we bring to the table. The ecosystem that we have is robust, and it is international. So our website is below. You can also see us on our YouTube XR Consulting page, where we've got a number of interviews. Kevin's interview will be posted as well. And keep an eye out for more XR Consulting interviews and teaching opportunities. Thanks for everybody, and we'll look forward to another interview and possibly another interview with Kevin. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Jeff.
Once again, we are Crossroads Consulting. I'm Jeff. He's Billy. We're available to talk to you about any issues that come up with regards to your business. Our business model is to help you find solutions. There's no cost, there's no obligation to talk to us. You've seen some of the interviews that we've done. We have a lot of resources that we can bring to the table. We welcome you the opportunity to talk to you about your business and some of the challenges that you're facing now. We'll do our best to find the solutions. Again, there's no cost, no obligation.